This is K.M. Weiland, and you're listening to the 122nd episode of the Wordplay Podcast. Rewriting isn't usually something I would list as one of my top 10 favorite parts of the writing process. It's more like one of those things you have to do if you're a responsible human being. Kind of like dusting the house and cleaning the kitty litter. Well, maybe not that bad. But this last rewrite of Dreamlander has so far been a complete blast. I am thoroughly enjoying myself. So far I'm just sprucing up the first couple chapters. Nothing radical, more just filling in some necessary blanks and fleshing out my fantasy world a bit more. I may change my mind about how fun this is when I get into the nitty-gritty of writing from scratch a handful of chapters here in another week or so. But for now, this rewrite is behaving so beautifully, it's almost more fun than creating a brand new story. Who'd have thunk, right? Are your dialogue beats repetitious? The latest post in the video series on my blog analyzes the pitfalls of repetitious action beats and offers suggestions for keeping your actions fresh and interesting between lines of dialogue. You can watch the video on my blog at wordplay-kmweiland. That's weiland.blogspot.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. And now I hope you enjoy this week's podcast. How do you know which rules to break? Writers are no exception to the artists or rebels stereotype. We're rogues and rule breakers, and proud of it, thank you, ma'am. The only teensy little problem we have is that we're not always certain which rules to break. Tongue-in-cheek, I often say writing has only one rule, and that's break all the rules. That's great fun as far as it goes, but taken at face value it won't get us published or read. The rules of writing are really more conventions than rules, long-held traditions that have become popular and effective ways of communicating our stories to our readers. There are no writing police, gatekeepers aside, who will slap you into cuffs for breaking those traditions, any more than there's a guarantee you'll be published if you obediently follow all the rules. Writing isn't a dot-to-dot puzzle that must be constructed formulaically. The best of art is all about experimentation and growth. That's why we get to be wild and break a few rules. But which rules? Popular advice says writers should learn the rules, follow most of them, and break a few. But which few? Are there certain rules that are concrete and others that aren't? Are there certain rules that should be broken? It's all so doggone confusing. We want to be breakout writers, we want to follow enough rules to get past the gatekeepers, but we also want to break the right rules to make our art unique, and yes, we admit it, think outside the box brilliant. So when the writing gurus tell you to be brave and break some rules, crying out loud, which rules are they talking about? Because heaven forbid we choose the wrong rule to break and end up in the writer's equivalent of solitary confinement. This is where I tell you the million-dollar secret. I am about to reveal the answer to this much-pondered question. I'm going to unveil the veiled, unmask the masked, and just generally give it to you straight. The right rules to break depend entirely upon you as a reader. Think about your own reading experiences. As a highly trained author, you no doubt read with one eye on the plot and the other on the craft. When an author strays from the beaten path and starts taking a baseball bat to the rules, conventions, traditions of the elders, which cracks of that bat make you cringe, and which surprise and delight you? Trust yourself as a reader, especially if you've educated yourself enough to read like a writer. When your gut tells you something works, even if your internal editor starts carping, pay attention. Likely the reason whatever author you're reading is able to break this particular rule is because he's doing it purposefully and skillfully and brilliantly. Just because he's pulling it off doesn't mean you'll be able to run over to your keyboard and be equally rebellious and brilliant. But if you understand and like what he's doing, don't be afraid to give it a little experimental whirl. On the other hand, if your broken rule klaxon starts screaming in the middle of a good book, and instead of invoking an odd how do you do that, your gag reflex starts hopping, don't you dare try to break that same rule in your own writing. Listen to the gut. It's a better writer than the head. It knows which rules need to be broken to further a story, and which rules, if broken, will only nauseate your readers. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, visit me on the web at wordplay-kmweiland, that's weiland.blogspot.com, and be sure to listen again next week.